The year is 1865. The cannons have fallen silent. A 4-year storm of brutal, bloody conflict, the American Civil War, has finally passed. The nation, though technically reunited, is a fractured, grieving shell of its former self. Cities lie in ruins, fields are fallow, and the very soul of America is scarred. The path forward is shrouded in mist, a daunting challenge of reconstruction and reconciliation. How does a country heal from a war, fought brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor? How does it begin to piece itself back together? For millions, the end of the war meant the beginning of a new, long-awaited chapter. Freedom. But this freedom was a fragile dawn, breaking over a landscape of uncertainty. For the nearly 4 million formerly enslaved African Americans, the future was an unwritten page. They were no longer property. But what were they now? Where would they go? How would they build lives, find work, and secure a place in a society that had, for centuries, denied their very humanity? The promise of liberty was real, but the path to realizing it was fraught with peril. Amidst this profound uncertainty, there was a group of men who had already stared down the barrel of peril and fought for the very freedom their people now tentatively embraced. Over 180,000 African American men had answered the call, donning the blue uniforms of the Union Army. They were soldiers, patriots who fought with a unique and powerful motivation. They weren't just fighting for the preservation of a nation. They were fighting for their own liberation, for the freedom of their families, for the dawning of a new era. They fought in legendary engagements, from the desperate charge at Fort Wagner to the decisive battles at Nashville and the Crater. They faced not only the Confederate enemy, but also prejudice and discrimination within their own ranks. They were paid less than their white counterparts. For much of the war, were often assigned the most grueling manual labor, and faced the constant threat of execution or re-enslavement if captured. Yet, they persevered. They proved their valor, their discipline, and their unwavering commitment to the cause of union and freedom, earning the respect of many who had once doubted their capabilities. Their contributions were instrumental in turning the tide of the war. With the Confederacy's surrender, these brave soldiers were They returned to a world that was both new and unsettlingly familiar. While they were legally free, the specter of racial hostility loomed large. The South, defeated but defiant, was a dangerous place. Economic opportunities were scarce, and the social order was in chaos. For many of these veterans, their time in the military had given them more than just combat experience. It had given them a sense of purpose, a structure, a steady income, and a community built on shared struggle and mutual respect. The Army had been a crucible that forged not just soldiers, but leaders, men of discipline and resolve. As they looked at the uncertain world before them, many of these veterans sought to hold on to that sense of purpose and stability. They had proven their worth on the battlefield. Now they wanted to continue serving the nation they had helped to save. They saw the military not just as a job, but as a pathway to full citizenship, a way to continue demonstrating their loyalty and to protect the hard-won gains of the war. Their desire to serve was a powerful testament to their belief in the American ideal, even when America itself was struggling to live up to it. Washington, D.C. was listening. Congress, grappling with the monumental task of Reconstruction and the need to manage the vast, untamed territories of the American West, recognized a unique opportunity. The nation needed a strong, professional army, and here was a pool of experienced, disciplined, and motivated soldiers ready to serve. In 1866, a landmark piece of legislation was passed, the Army Organization Act. This act wasn't just another bureaucratic regime, it was revolutionary. For the first time in the nation's history, Congress authorized the formation of regular, peacetime Army regiments composed entirely of black soldiers. This was a radical departure from the past. Before the Civil War, African Americans were barred from military service. During the war, their units were considered temporary, state-level volunteer forces. But this act established them as a permanent, integral part of the United States Army. 6 new regiments were created: the 9th and 10th Cavalry, and the 38th Treintainove Tiache, 40 and 41st Infantry. These were not token gestures. These were to be fully equipped, professionally led units, tasked with some of the most difficult and dangerous missions the nation faced. The men who filled their ranks would be drawn from the ranks of Civil War veterans and newly freed men eager to prove their mettle. They would be sent to the frontier, to the vast, arid plains and rugged mountains of the American West. This was a new beginning, born from the ashes of the old. For the African American men who would soon enlist, it was a chance to forge a new identity. They were no longer just former slaves or wartime volunteers. They were professional soldiers of the United States Army. They were pioneers, stepping into an unknown future, ready to write the next chapter of their story and of America's. On the remote outposts of the frontier, under the vast western sky, they would face new challenges, new enemies, and new opportunities. They would earn a new name, one given to them by their Native American adversaries. A name spoken with a mixture of fear and respect. A name that would echo through history. Buffalo Soldiers. Their legend was about to begin. Thank you so much for watching this first chapter. We're just getting started on this incredible journey into the history of the Buffalo Soldiers. If you found this story as compelling as I do, please hit that like button, and more importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss what comes next as we ride out onto the frontier with these legendary regiments. See you in the next chapter. Welcome back to our series on the incredible history of the Buffalo Soldiers. If you missed our first chapter, be sure to check it out to get the full context. Today, we're diving deep into the year 1866, a pivotal moment in American history when the Buffalo Soldiers were officially born. The year is 1866. The smoke of the Civil War is still clearing, and the nation is grappling with the monumental task of reconstruction. In the halls of power in Washington, D.C., a landmark decision is being made. On July 28th, the U.S. Congress passes the Army Organization Act. This wasn't just another piece of legislation. It was a revolutionary bill that would forever change the face of the United States military. For the first time in the nation's history, during peacetime, the act authorized the creation of regiments to be composed entirely of African American soldiers. This was a monumental step forward, a direct result of the valor and sacrifice shown by black soldiers who had fought for the Union during the Civil War. They had proven their courage, their loyalty, and their right to serve. Initially, 6 all-black regiments were established: the 9th and 10th Cavalry, and the 38th, 39 Diache, 40 Diache, and 41st Infantry. This was a moment of immense pride and opportunity. For many of the men who enlisted, this was their first chance at a steady job, an education, and a sense of dignity that had been denied to them for so long. The Army offered not just a paycheck, but a path to literacy and a new life. Imagine the scene. Thousands of newly freed men, alongside black veterans of the Civil War, lining up to enlist. They came from all walks of life, from farms in the South to cities in the North, all united by a common desire to prove their worth and serve the country that had for so long oppressed them. Recruitment was just the beginning. The training these men endured was rigorous, designed to turn civilians into disciplined soldiers capable of surviving in some of the most unforgiving environments in North America. They were often issued with second-hand equipment, older horses, and inadequate supplies compared to their white counterparts. Their commanding officers were white, as the Army did not yet permit black commissioned officers. Despite these inequalities, the recruits displayed an iron will. They trained relentlessly under the hot sun, learning horsemanship, marksmanship, and the harsh discipline of military life. Their determination was unshakable. They knew they were carrying the hopes and dreams of their people on their shoulders. In 1869, the Army underwent another reorganization. The 4 infantry regiments were consolidated into 2, the 24th and 25th Infantry. Together with the 9th and 10th Cavalry, these 4 regiments would become the legendary Buffalo Soldiers. Their first postings were not too comfortable forts or bustling cities. Instead, they were sent to the vast, rugged, and often hostile American West. They were stationed at remote outposts across Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and the Great Plains. Their lives were a constant struggle against the elements, from scorching deserts to freezing blizzards. Their duties were incredibly diverse and crucial to the westward expansion of the United States. They protected settlers, guarded mail routes, built roads and telegraph lines, and escorted wagon trains. They were the law and order in a lawless land, but their most famous role was their involvement in the so-called Indian Wars. Stationed on the frontier, They frequently came into contact and conflict with Native American tribes like the Cheyenne, Apache, and Comanche, who were fiercely defending their ancestral lands against encroachment. It was here, in the heart of the American West, that they earned their iconic name, Buffalo Soldiers. The exact origin of the name is a subject of historical discussion, but the most widely accepted story attributes it to the Native American tribes they fought, the Plains Indians, who held the buffalo in high reverence for its fierce bravery. Strength and resilience saw similar qualities in these black soldiers. They noted their dark, curly hair, which resembled the mane of a buffalo, and their incredible courage and fighting spirit in battle. The name Buffalo Soldier was not an insult. It was a mark of respect, an acknowledgement of their formidable prowess as warriors. The soldiers themselves embraced the name with pride. It became a symbol of their unique identity and their enduring strength in the face of adversity. The buffalo was a powerful symbol of the wild, untamed spirit of the West. And now, so were they. The image of the buffalo would soon be incorporated into the 10th Cavalry's regimental crest, cementing its place in their legacy forever. Life on the frontier was incredibly harsh. Beyond the threat of conflict, these soldiers faced intense racial prejudice, not only from the civilians they were sworn to protect, but sometimes even from within the military establishment itself. They were often stationed in the most isolated and undesirable locations. Yet, despite these challenges, the Buffalo Soldiers distinguished themselves with an exceptional service record. They had some of the lowest desertion rates in the entire Army. This speaks volumes about their discipline, morale, and commitment to their duty. They weren't just serving, they were building a legacy. They were proving, day by grueling day, that they were more than equal to the task. They were not just soldiers. They were pioneers, builders, and peacekeepers in a nation still struggling to live up to its own ideals of freedom and equality. These formative years, from their authorization by Congress to their trials by fire on the western frontier, forged the character of the Buffalo Soldiers. They overcame systemic discrimination and immense hardship to become one of the most respected and effective fighting forces in the U.S. Army. Their story is a powerful testament to the human spirit's ability to triumph over adversity. They laid the foundation for generations of African Americans who would continue to serve with distinction, breaking down barriers and changing the course of history. Join us next time as we explore the specific campaigns and remarkable individuals that defined the Buffalo Soldiers' service in the American West. We'll delve into the stories of heroism, the battles won, and the lasting impact they had on the shaping of the nation. The story is far from over. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this chapter of history as fascinating as we do, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next part of our series. We love hearing from you, so please leave your thoughts and questions in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Have you ever wondered where the name Buffalo Soldier came from? It's a question that takes us deep into the heart of the American West, into a story of conflict, respect, and enduring legacy. It wasn't a name given by the U.S. Army. Instead, it was bestowed by the very people they often faced in battle, the Native American tribes of the Great Plains. This name, born out of respect, would become a profound badge of honor for generations of African American soldiers. To understand the weight of this name, we first need to understand the significance of the buffalo. For many Plains tribes, like the Cheyenne and the Comanche, the buffalo, or bison, was not just an animal. It was a sacred being, central to their way of life and their spiritual beliefs. The buffalo was the ultimate symbol of strength, resilience, and sacred life. It provided food, clothing, shelter, everything. Its spirit was powerful. Its endurance, legit. To be compared to a buffalo was the highest form of respect. So, why did they see the buffalo in these newly arrived black soldiers? The connection was made on several levels. First, there was the physical resemblance. The soldiers' dark, curly hair was said to resemble the matted, woolly coat of the buffalo. It was a direct, visual link that the Native American warriors immediately recognized. But the comparison went far deeper than just appearances. It was about character. It was about spirit. The Plains warriors, who were legendary fighters themselves, witnessed firsthand the incredible courage and tenacity of the men of the 9th and 10th Cavalry and the 24th and 25th Infantry. These soldiers fought with a ferocity and a relentless fighting spirit that mirrored the way a cornered buffalo would fight to protect its herd. They were known for their incredible endurance, capable of marching for days under the harsh sun with limited supplies, never giving up. Imagine the scene. A small detachment of African American soldiers, outnumbered, holding their ground against a determined force. They fight with a courage that commands respect, a resilience that seems unbreakable. In Terais, the Plains warriors saw the same defiant, powerful spirit of the sacred buffalo. They didn't break. They didn't run. They endured. This wasn't a name given out of mockery. It was a name born from awe and admiration for a worthy adversary. The soldiers themselves could have rejected this name. They could have seen it as an insult coming from an enemy, but they didn't. They understood the deep respect embedded within it. They knew what the buffalo symbolized, and they recognized that this title was an acknowledgement of their own strength and valor. So, they embraced it. They took the name Buffalo Soldier and transformed it into a symbol of their own identity and pride. This name became a source of immense pride. It was a testament to their performance in the face of incredible adversity. Remember, these men were not just fighting on the frontier. They were also fighting against prejudice and discrimination within their own country and even their own army. They were often given the worst assignments, the poorest equipment, and faced constant racism. Yet, they served with distinction and honor. The name Buffalo Soldier became a unifying identity. It bound them together, a brotherhood forged in the crucible of the American West. It was a name that said, "We are strong, we are resilient, we are honorable." It was a name they would carry with them from the Plains Wars to the Spanish-American War and beyond. It was a name they passed down through generations. When you hear the term Buffalo Soldier today, it's important to remember its origins. It's not just a footnote in a history book. It is a living legacy, a powerful story of how a name given in honor by one group of warriors to another became an enduring symbol of courage, dignity, and the unbreakable spirit of those who wore it with pride. This name tells a story of respect earned under the most difficult of circumstances, a story that continues to inspire us all. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the past. If you found this story as powerful as I do, please give this video a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into history. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'll see you next time.
Imagine stepping back in time to the vast, untamed expanse of the American West. This isn't the romanticized version you see in movies. This is the raw, gritty reality of life on the frontier, a world where survival was a daily battle. Welcome to Chapter 4, Life on the Western Frontier. Today, we're peeling back the layers of history to uncover the stories of the soldiers stationed at the edge of the known world. These weren't just abstract figures in a textbook. They were real people, facing unimaginable challenges. Their lives were a constant struggle against the elements. Think blistering summer heat that could bake the very earth, followed by bone-chilling winters where the wind howled like a hungry wolf. Snow could pile up so high it would bury their primitive outposts, cutting them off from the rest of the world for months on end. But the climate was just one of their adversaries. Isolation was another, a silent enemy that could gnaw at a man's spirit. These soldiers lived in rudimentary forts, often little more than a collection of rough-hewn log cabins or sod houses dug into the prairie. They were hundreds, sometimes thousands, of miles from the bustling cities of the East, far from their families, their friends, and everything they had ever known. Letters were a lifeline, but they could take weeks, even months, to arrive carrying news that was already old. The loneliness could be profound, a vast emptiness that mirrored the sprawling landscape around them. And within this isolated world, another struggle played out: prejudice. The army on the frontier was a microcosm of the nation itself, a melting pot of different backgrounds, cultures, and ethnicities. But this diversity often led to friction. Soldiers from different regions, immigrants from various countries, and particularly the Buffalo Soldiers, the African American regiments, faced discrimination and hostility. Not just from those they were tasked to fight, but sometimes from within their own ranks. Yet, despite these internal divisions, they had to rely on one another to survive. Today, They were all in the same desperate situation, facing the same dangers, and this shared experience often forged bonds stronger than any prejudice. Let's talk about their daily duties. Life wasn't about glorious charges and heroic last stands. It was about monotony punctuated by moments of sheer terror. A soldier's day might begin before dawn with a bugle call slicing through the cold air. It would be filled with grueling drills, maintaining equipment, and standing guard, always watching the horizon for any sign of trouble. The most demanding tasks were the long patrols, days, sometimes weeks, on horseback, crossing rugged terrain under a relentless sun, or through blinding blizzards. They were the eyes and ears of the frontier, mapping unknown territories, protecting wagon trains, and enforcing a fragile peace. Supplies were a constant worry. The supply lines were long and unreliable. A delayed wagon train could mean the difference between a full belly and gnawing hunger. Rations were often basic and repetitive. Hardtack, salted meat, and coffee. Fresh food was a rare luxury. They learned to hunt, to forage, and to make do with whatever they could find. Sickness was also a constant threat. With limited medical knowledge and supplies, a simple infection or a common illness could prove fatal in the harsh conditions of these remote outposts. And then there were the missions, the moments that defined their service. These weren't just patrols. They were dangerous assignments that carried the constant risk of conflict. Tensions in the West were high, and clashes were frequent and brutal. These soldiers were often outnumbered, operating in unfamiliar territory against skilled and determined opponents who were fighting to protect their own lands and way of life. Every ride out from the fort gates was a gamble, and not everyone came back. The psychological toll of this constant danger, of losing comrades and witnessing the harsh realities of frontier conflict, was immense. But here's the most remarkable part of their story. Amidst all this hardship, the brutal weather, the crushing isolation, the scarce supplies, and the ever-present danger, something incredible took root, a deep, unshakable sense of brotherhood. These men, from all walks of life, thrown together in the crucible of the frontier, formed bonds as strong as family. They shared their meager rations, cared for each other when sick or wounded, and stood shoulder to shoulder in the face of peril. They found humor in the darkest of times and shared stories around the campfire under a blanket of stars. This camaraderie was their greatest strength. It was the glue that held them together when everything else seemed to be falling apart. They developed a profound sense of pride in their regiment, pride in their ability to endure, and pride in each other. They weren't just soldiers following orders. They were a unit, a band of brothers who had stared into the abyss of the American West and had not flinched. They relied on one another for their very survival, and in doing so, they created a unique and powerful culture all their own. Their legacy is not just one of conflict, but of endurance, resilience, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. They were the sentinels of the frontier, ordinary men living extraordinary lives, whose sacrifices and struggles paved the way for the nation we know today. Their stories, often overlooked, are a vital chapter in the grand, complex narrative of America. They remind us that history is not just about dates and battles, but about the people who lived it, who struggled, who persevered, and who, against all odds, found a sense of purpose and belonging in one of the most challenging environments imaginable. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the past. The story of the American West is vast and complex, and we've only just scratched the surface. If you found this chapter of history as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next episode. See you next time.
Welcome back to our series. Today we're diving into one of the most complex and somber chapters in the story of the Buffalo Soldiers, their role in the Indian Wars. This period is filled with conflict, contradiction, and a profound sense of irony, as one marginalized group was tasked with carrying out the policies of a government that had oppressed them both. After the Civil War, the United States turned its full attention to westward expansion, a movement that inevitably led to conflict with the Native American tribes who had called these lands home for centuries. The Buffalo Soldiers, stationed at remote forts across the Great Plains in the Southwest, were placed directly on the front lines of this clash of cultures. Their duties were vast, They protected settlers traveling west, guarded mail routes, built roads and telegraph lines, and mapped uncharted territory. In essence, they were the vanguard of American expansion. This placed them in an incredibly difficult position. Here were men who had just fought for their own freedom, now serving a government that was actively dispossessing another people of their lands and way of life. It's a historical paradox that is impossible to ignore. Two groups, both facing immense prejudice and discrimination from the dominant society, found themselves on opposite sides of the battlefield. The Buffalo Soldiers were involved in numerous campaigns against powerful tribes like the Comanche, Kiowa, Cheyenne, and Apache. These were not simple skirmishes. They were prolonged, grueling conflicts fought across harsh and unforgiving landscapes. The soldiers had to adapt to new forms of warfare, tracking and engaging highly mobile and skilled warriors who knew the land intimately. One of the most famous and prolonged conflicts was against the Apache in the Southwest. Led by figures like Victorio and Geronimo, the Apache were masters of guerrilla warfare. The Buffalo Soldiers of the 9th and 10th Cavalry spent years in pursuit, enduring blistering heat, freezing winters, and constant shortages of water and supplies. Their tenacity and resilience in these campaigns became legendary. They were known for their ability to endure incredible hardship on long patrols, often outlasting their opponents and earning their respect as formidable fighters. Similarly, on the southern plains, they clashed with the Comanche and Kiowa. The Red River War of 1874 to 1875 was a major turning point, where the Buffalo Soldiers played a crucial role in a multi-pronged campaign designed to force the remaining free-roaming tribes onto reservations. Their actions helped secure the Texas frontier, but it came at a great cost to the Native American way of life, particularly with the near extinction of the buffalo, their primary source of survival. It's vital to understand the human element on both sides. While the soldiers were following orders, many records and diaries show a complex range of emotions. There are accounts of grudging respect for their adversaries. Some soldiers likely felt a degree of empathy, recognizing a shared experience of being targeted and misunderstood by the U.S. government. However, their primary identity was that of a U.S. soldier, and their duty was to carry out their missions. For them, service was a path to citizenship, respect, and a steady paycheck, opportunities denied to them in most other parts of American society. On the other side, Native American tribes were fighting for their very existence, their land, their culture, their freedom. The arrival of settlers, railroads, and soldiers represented a catastrophic threat to everything they had ever known. Their resistance was a desperate, courageous fight for survival against overwhelming odds. The Buffalo Soldiers were often the first and only line of defense for the new settlements, mail carriers and stagecoaches that were the lifelines of the West. They were the law in a lawless land, and their presence, while enforcing a policy of expansion, also brought a measure of stability to the frontier. They rescued stranded travelers, protected railroad crews, and pursued outlaws of all backgrounds. This chapter of their history is not about glorifying conflict. It's about understanding the incredibly complicated circumstances these men faced. They performed their duties with exceptional courage and professionalism, earning 18 medals of honor during the Indian Wars alone. Yet, their legacy is forever intertwined with the tragic story of America's westward expansion and its devastating impact on Native American peoples. They were pawns in a larger game, instruments of a policy that had profound and lasting consequences. Thinking about the Buffalo Soldiers during this era forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our nation as history. It's a story without simple heroes or villains, but one filled with individuals caught in the sweeping, often brutal, tides of history. They were soldiers serving their country, but the context of that service adds layers of meaning that we are still grappling with today. Thank you for joining us for this difficult but important discussion. The story of the Buffalo Soldiers is a reflection of America itself, full of courage, contradiction, and the enduring struggle for freedom and identity. If you found this video insightful, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more. We'll see you in the next chapter. When we think of the American West, what images come to mind? Cowboys, gold rushes, dramatic standoffs. It's a picture painted by countless movies and legends. But what if I told you that a huge part of this story, a foundational piece, is often left in the shadows? Today, we're diving deep into the real story of building the American West, beyond the sensationalized battles and dusty shootouts. We're talking about the sweat, the grit, and the sheer determination that turned a wild frontier into the nation we know today. History often focuses on the conflicts, the famous generals, and the dramatic turning points. And while those are important, they're only part of the picture. The true construction of the West was a monumental task of engineering and labor, carried out by people whose names you might not find in your average textbook. These weren't just soldiers waiting for the next fight. They were builders, engineers, and protectors. Imagine the vast, untamed landscape of the 19th century American West. There were no highways, no instant communication, no real infrastructure to speak of. Connecting the country from east to west was one of the greatest challenges of the era. And who was at the heart of this challenge? The very same individuals often remembered only for their military roles. They traded their rifles for shovels and pickaxes, carving paths through unforgiving terrain. They built roads where there were only dirt tracks, laying down the arteries that would pump life, trade, and people into the heart of the continent. Think about the sheer physical effort required through scorching deserts, over rugged mountains, and across wide-open prairies. These men labored, day in and day out. These weren't just simple paths. They were vital lifelines that allowed for the movement of goods, mail, and settlers. And then there was the telegraph. In an age before phones or the internet, the telegraph was the pinnacle of communication technology. It was the original information superhighway. Stringing thousands of miles of telegraph wire across the country was a Herculean effort. These crews, often protected by soldiers who sometimes even joined in the labor, battled harsh weather, difficult terrain, and the immense logistical challenge of it all. Each pole raised and each wire connected was a victory, shrinking the vast distances of the West and stitching the nation closer together. They were also responsible for constructing the forts that dotted the frontier. These weren't just military outposts. They were beacons of stability. They served as administrative centers, supply depots, and safe havens in a land that was often unpredictable and dangerous. The construction of these forts, using local timber and stone, was a testament to their resourcefulness and resilience. These structures projected a sense of order and provided a nucleus around which new settlements could grow. So, while one hand might have held a rifle for protection, the other was busy building. This duality is crucial to understanding their role. They weren't just a passive force. They were active participants in the creation of the West. Their mission was as much about construction as it was about conflict. Now, let's talk about the people moving west. We've all seen the classic images of wagon trains slowly making their way across the plains. These journeys were perilous, filled with countless dangers from the environment, accidents, and the sheer strain of travel. Who ensured these families, these pioneers seeking a new life, had a fighting chance of making it? The answer, again, lies with these dedicated guardians of the frontier. They provided escorts for wagon trains, creating a protective bubble around these vulnerable groups of civilians. Their presence was a powerful deterrent to anyone who might wish to harm the travelers. They scouted ahead for safe passages, helped repair broken wagons, and offered a sense of security that was priceless to those on the trail. For many families, seeing the familiar uniform was a sign that they were not alone, that they had protection on their long journey. The same protection was extended to another monumental project, the Transcontinental Railroad. The railroad was the iron spine that would truly unify the country. But building it was an immense and dangerous undertaking. Railroad crews faced constant threats as they laid track through territories that were far from settled. Soldiers patrolled the rail lines, protecting the workers and the valuable equipment from attacks. They established temporary camps and rode alongside the construction crews, ensuring the work could continue with minimal interruption. Without this dedicated protection, the pace of railroad construction would have been drastically slower, and the cost in lives and resources far greater. The rhythmic hammering of spikes into ties was a sound often accompanied by the steady presence of these watchful protectors. And let's not forget the stagecoach lines, the fastest way to move mail, money, and passengers before the railroad was complete. These stagecoaches were prime targets for outlaws. Soldiers rode as guards on these coaches and protected the remote stations where horses were changed and passengers rested. They were the unsung heroes who made sure the mail got through and that communication and commerce could flow, however precariously, across the vast expanses of the frontier. When you put all of these pieces together, a new picture of the West begins to emerge. It's a picture not just of conquest, but of construction. Not just of conflict, but of connection. The presence of these builders and protectors brought a level of safety and order that was essential for civilization to take root. They were, in many ways, the first line of law and order in places that had none. Their forts became the seeds of future towns. The roads they built became the highways we use today. The routes they protected for the telegraph and railroad defined the corridors of modern commerce and communication. They weren't just observers of westward expansion. They were the engine driving it forward, the scaffolding upon which a new society was built. So why is this contribution so often overlooked in our history books? The dramatic flair of battles and famous conflicts often captures the historical imagination more easily than the slow, steady work of building a road or guarding a construction crew. The narrative of taming the West often simplifies a complex story into one of heroes and villains. Cowboys and Indians, but history is rarely that simple. The real story is often found in the daily grind, in the monumental but unglamorous tasks that make everything else possible. The contributions of these soldiers, many of whom were African-American Buffalo soldiers, whose stories have been doubly marginalized, were absolutely fundamental. They were the glue that held the fragile process of expansion together. Their legacy is not just in the battles they fought, but in the very fabric of the American West. It's in the layout of the roads, the paths of the railways, and the locations of towns that grew from the forts they established. By bringing a measure of security and by literally building the infrastructure of a new society, they laid the groundwork for everything that followed. To ignore their role as builders and protectors is to miss a fundamental chapter of the American story. It's a story of incredible hardship, perseverance, and nation-building on a grand scale. So the next time you think of the Old West, I hope you'll remember not just the cowboys, but also the engineers, the road builders, the telegraph crews, and the soldiers who protected them all. They were the ones who turned a dream of a coast-to-coast nation into a concrete reality. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into a lesser-known side of American history. If you found this perspective interesting and want to uncover more hidden stories with me, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us continue to bring these important narratives to light. We'll see you in the next video. Hello and welcome back to our series. Today, we're diving into Chapter 7, focusing on a regiment whose legacy is as powerful as their motto, the 9th U.S. Cavalry. Their story is one of unwavering courage and an unbreakable spirit. After the Civil War, the U.S. Army underwent a significant reorganization. 6 new regiments of African-American soldiers were authorized, and among them, the 9th Cavalry was born. Their journey began in the vibrant, post-war city of New Orleans, Louisiana. In 1866, imagine the scene. A city rebuilding, a nation redefining itself, and a new regiment of soldiers stepping forward to serve a country that had only just begun to recognize their freedom. Leading these men was Colonel Edward Hatch, a decorated Union officer from the war. Hatch was tasked with a monumental challenge: to mold these newly enlisted men, many of whom were formerly enslaved, into a disciplined and effective fighting force. It was under his command that the 9th Cavalry would forge its identity and begin its legendary service on the American frontier. The men who joined came from all walks of life, united by a desire to prove their worth, to secure their place as citizens, and to build a better future. They were ready to face whatever came their way, and their spirit was perfectly captured in the powerful motto they adopted. This motto wasn't just a collection of words, it was a promise, a declaration of their intent and capability. It was "we can, we will." Think about the power behind that simple phrase. For a group of men who had been systematically told for generations what the asterisk could not asterisk do, this was a profound statement of defiance and self-belief. Weaken spoke to their inherent ability, their strength, and their potential. We will was their commitment, their unwavering resolve to see any mission through, no matter the difficulty. This motto would become the guiding principle for every action they took, from the dusty plains of Texas to the rugged mountains of New Mexico. It was a creed that resonated in every drill, every patrol, and every courageous stand they made. Soon after their formation and initial training, the 9th Cavalry was dispatched to one of the most challenging and volatile regions in the country, Texas. The frontier in the late 1860s was a vast, unforgiving landscape. They were tasked with protecting settlers, guarding mail routes, building forts, and engaging with Native American tribes, including the formidable Comanche and Kiowa. The conditions were brutal. They faced scorching heat, bone-chilling cold, severe water shortages, and often inadequate supplies. On top of these physical hardships, they faced deep-seated prejudice from many of the very people they were assigned to protect. Despite these immense obstacles, the troopers of the 9th proved their mettle time and time again. They were involved in countless skirmishes and major engagements across the state. One notable instance was their relentless pursuit of raiding parties, tracking them for hundreds of miles across the harsh terrain of the Llano Estacado, or Staked Plains. These weren't just simple patrols. They were grueling campaigns that tested the limits of human endurance. The men of the 9th displayed exceptional skill as horsemen and marksmen, earning a reputation for their tenacity. They didn't just survive the Texas frontier. They worked to bring a measure of stability to it, all while living up to their motto, "We can, we will." Their service in Texas laid the foundation for the regiment's legendary status. From the harsh plains of Texas, the 9th Cavalry's journey took them westward into the rugged and mountainous terrain of New Mexico and the so-called Indian Territory, which is now modern-day Oklahoma. Here, they found themselves at the heart of the Apache Wars, a series of conflicts that would further cement their reputation for bravery. They were pitted against brilliant and determined Native American leaders like Victorio and Geronimo. The campaigns in New Mexico were a different kind of warfare, characterized by guerrilla tactics, ambushes in narrow canyons, and long, arduous pursuits through treacherous mountains. The troopers of the 9th adapted and they became experts in tracking and mountain warfare. For example, during the Victorio War in 1879 and 1880, elements of the 9th Cavalry engaged in some of the most intense fighting of their service. They pursued Victorio's band of Apache warriors across southern New Mexico and into Mexico, engaging in numerous battles. These weren't men fighting on familiar ground. They were operating in a hostile environment, often outnumbered yet they consistently demonstrated incredible discipline and courage under fire. Their service in these territories wasn't just about fighting. It was about enduring, adapting, and proving that they were among the most capable soldiers in the U.S. Army. The legacy of the 9th Cavalry is built upon countless individual acts of heroism and a collective discipline that was second to none. Tales of their bravery became legendary across the frontier. There's the story of the Battle of Tularosa, where a small detachment of troopers held off a much larger force, or the daring rescue of a surrounded wagon train. These weren't isolated incidents. For their courageous service, 18 troopers from the 9th Cavalry were awarded the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration. Think about that. 18 men recognized for valor above and beyond the call of duty. Their commanding officers, including Colonel Hatch, consistently praised their performance in official reports. They were noted for their low desertion rates compared to white regiments and their exceptional conduct in the field. The Native American warriors they fought against also gave them a name born out of respect for their fighting prowess and tenacity. They called them Buffalo Soldiers. This name, which they shared with the 10th Cavalry, became a badge of honor. It was a testament to their strength, their resilience, and their undeniable spirit. The 9th Cavalry didn't just earn honors and medals. They earned the respect of their adversaries and carved out a place of distinction in American history, proving every day that we can, we will. The story of the 9th Cavalry is a powerful chapter in the history of the American West. From their formation in New Orleans to their distinguished service across Texas, New Mexico, and beyond, these men embodied their motto, "We can, we will." They faced down not only armed adversaries but also the venom of prejudice, and they did so with honor, discipline, and unparalleled courage. Their contributions were vital to the shaping of the nation, and their legacy continues to inspire. The Buffalo Soldiers of the 9th Cavalry proved that heroism knows no color, and that the will to succeed can overcome any obstacle. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. The stories of these soldiers deserve to be told and remembered. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next episode. We'll see you next time. Welcome back to our series on the unsung heroes of the American West. Today, we ride into Chapter 8 to uncover the incredible story of the 10th U.S. Cavalry Regiment, a unit whose motto, "Ready and Forward," perfectly captured their spirit and dedication. They were more than just soldiers. They were pioneers, protectors, and legends forged in the crucible of the frontier. After the Civil War, the United States military underwent a significant reorganization. In 1866, Congress authorized the formation of several new regiments, including 2 cavalry units composed of African American soldiers. One of these was the legendary 10th Cavalry, organized under the command of a remarkable and forward-thinking officer, Colonel Benjamin Grierson. Grierson, a Union veteran famed for his daring cavalry raid through Mississippi during the Civil War, was an unconventional choice. He was a musician by trade, not a career military man, but he possessed a deep sense of justice and a firm belief in the capabilities of the men he was chosen to lead. He handpicked his officers, seeking those who shared his commitment to fairness and equality, a rare quality in the era. The regiment was established at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, where thousands of newly freed African American men, eager to prove their worth and serve their country, flocked to enlist. These weren't just men looking for a job. They were men seeking dignity, purpose, and a chance to build a new identity in a nation that had for so long denied them one. The training was grueling. These recruits, many of whom had never ridden a horse or fired a rifle, had to be molded into a disciplined and effective fighting force. Under Grierson's steady leadership, they mastered horsemanship, marksmanship, and the complex tactics of cavalry warfare. They quickly became known for their exceptional skill, their incredible physical endurance, and a remarkable esprit de corps. They weren't just a regiment, they were a brotherhood, bound together by shared hardship and a common goal. It was during these formative years that they earned a nickname from the Native American tribes they encountered, Buffalo Soldiers. The name was a sign of respect, comparing their fierce fighting spirit and dark, curly hair to the tough, sacred buffalo. Once their training was complete, the 10th Cavalry was dispatched to the vast, arid, and often hostile landscapes of the American Southwest. For the next 2 decades, they would operate across Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Their duties were as varied as the terrain they covered. They protected settlers and wagon trains, built roads and telegraph lines, scouted uncharted territory, and pursued outlaws and raiders. They were the law and the lifeline in a land that often had neither. Life on the frontier was incredibly difficult. The soldiers of the 10th faced not only the physical challenges of extreme weather, scarce water, and rugged terrain, but also the pervasive sting of racial prejudice. They were often given inferior equipment, poor quality horses, and stationed at the most isolated and dangerous outposts. Yet, despite these obstacles, they consistently performed their duties with a level of professionalism and courage that was second to none. The 10th Cavalry's combat record is nothing short of extraordinary. They participated in dozens of major campaigns and countless smaller skirmishes. One of their most famous engagements was the Battle of Palodero Canyon in 1874. As part of a larger campaign to pacify the southern plains, the 10th, alongside other units, descended into the massive canyon, a natural fortress for several Native American tribes. Their relentless pursuit and strategic maneuvering were critical to the campaign's success, effectively ending a major conflict in the region. But their legacy isn't just built on large-scale battles. The 10th Cavalry became legendary for their high-speed pursuits and daring rescue missions. Time and again, they would ride for days on end, covering vast distances with little rest or food, to rescue besieged settlers or track down elusive war parties. Their unmatched endurance and expert tracking skills were renowned throughout the West. One notable incident involved the pursuit of the Apache leader Victorio in the early 1880s. The 10th chased him relentlessly across the unforgiving deserts of New Mexico and Texas, a testament to their incredible stamina and determination. Colonel Grierson remained in command of the 10th for nearly 25 years, an unusually long tenure that fostered a deep sense of loyalty and stability within the regiment. His leadership was instrumental in their success. He fought tirelessly for his men, advocating for better supplies, fair treatment, and recognition of their achievements. Under his guidance, The 10th Cavalry not only became one of the most effective units in the U.S. Army, but also a powerful symbol of African American pride and capability. Their service didn't end with the Indian Wars. The 10th Cavalry would go on to fight with distinction in the Spanish-American War, where they charged up San Juan Hill alongside Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders, and later served in the Philippines. Their motto, "Ready and Forward," wasn't just a phrase, it was their way of life. They were always ready for the next challenge, always moving forward in the face of adversity, whether it was on the battlefield or in the fight for equality. The story of the 10th Cavalry is a crucial chapter in American history. They were trailblazers who shattered stereotypes and paved the way for future generations. Their legacy is one of unwavering courage, unmatched skill, and indomitable spirit. They proved, beyond any doubt, that heroism knows no color. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past. The story of the Buffalo Soldiers is a powerful reminder of the diverse threads that make up the fabric of American history. If you found this story as inspiring as we do, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'll see you next time. When we picture the American West, what comes to mind? Cowboys, vast open prairies, and wagon trains venturing into the unknown. But behind this iconic imagery lies a story of discipline, dedication, and nation-building. A story largely written by the soldiers of the United States Army, particularly the 24th and 25th Infantry Regiments. These men weren't just soldiers. They were the architects and guardians of the frontier. Today, we're pulling back the curtain to reveal their essential, yet often overlooked, role in shaping the American West. The life of a frontier soldier was anything but glamorous. Forget dramatic shootouts and glorious charges. The reality was a daily grind of hard labor and constant vigilance. The 24th and 25th Infantry Regiments, comprised of African American soldiers, were posted to some of the most remote and challenging forts scattered across the vast expanse of the West. Their primary mission was security. They stood guard over these isolated outposts, which were often little more than a collection of wooden or adobe buildings in the middle of nowhere. These forts served as vital hubs of safety and supply for the surrounding regions. Their duties extended far beyond the fort walls. Imagine a family of settlers, their entire lives packed into a single wagon, crossing hundreds of miles of unfamiliar and often hostile territory. Who ensured they reached their destination safely? Very often, it was detachments from these regiments. These soldiers escorted wagon trains, providing a protective screen against potential threats and offering a sense of security that was priceless to those traveling into the unknown. They patrolled the major trails, like the Santa Fe and Oregon trails, keeping the arteries of westward migration open and flowing. They were the silent guardians, making the dream of a new life in the West a possibility for thousands. But their work wasn't just about guarding people. It was about building the very infrastructure of a new society. The West was a land of immense distances and formidable natural barriers. To connect it, to tame it, you needed roads and communication lines. And who built them? The soldiers. Men of the 24th and 25th Infantry traded their rifles for shovels, axes, and pickaxes. They carved roads through dense forests and rugged mountains, laid telegraph lines that stretched for hundreds of miles, and strung fences to manage vast tracts of land. Think about the sheer physical effort involved. Under the blazing sun, or in the freezing cold, these men toiled day in and day out. Every mile of road they cleared, every telegraph pole they erected, was a tangible piece of progress. These telegraph lines were the internet of the 19th century, shrinking vast distances and allowing for near-instant communication between isolated forts and the eastern cities. This network was critical for coordinating military movements, reporting on conditions, and administering these huge territories. So when you think of the expansion of the American frontier, remember that it was built, quite literally, on the sweat and labor of these infantrymen. They weren't just defending the frontier, they were actively constructing it. Life in these remote garrisons forged a unique and powerful sense of community and discipline. The daily routine was rigorous, marked by drill, inspections, and maintenance of equipment. This constant training kept them sharp and ready for any eventuality, but it also instilled a sense of order and purpose in an otherwise chaotic environment. They took immense pride in their professionalism, and their performance often earned the respect, sometimes grudgingly, of the very communities they were there to protect. These soldiers proved time and again, that dedication and competence knew no color. They were professionals, and their record of service speaks for itself. They were the steady, reliable presence that allowed settlements to grow into towns and territories to mature into states. Now, let's talk about innovation. Armies are often at the forefront of technological adoption, and the frontier was a perfect laboratory for new ideas. In TEI's spirit, the 25th Infantry Regiment embarked on one of the most fascinating experiments of the era, the Bicycle Corps. In the 1890s, the bicycle was a cutting-edge piece of technology. Lieutenant James R. Moss, stationed at Fort Missoula, Montana, saw its potential for military use. He believed that bicycles could be faster, quieter, and cheaper to maintain than horses for certain missions, like scouting and dispatch carrying. So, in 1896, he formed a specialized corps of soldiers from the 25th Infantry to test his theory. These men weren't just going for a casual ride. They undertook epic long-distance journeys to test the limits of both the men and the machines. Their most famous expedition was a staggering 1,900-mile journey from Fort Missoula all the way to St. Louis, Missouri. Can you imagine? They pedaled over mountains, across prairies, and through muddy, unpaved roads, carrying all their gear, rifles, and ammunition. They faced terrible weather, mechanical breakdowns, and sheer physical exhaustion. But they made it. Their incredible journey proved that bicycles were a viable, if challenging, means of military transport. They demonstrated remarkable endurance and resourcefulness, fixing their single-speed, heavy steel bikes with whatever they had on hand. While the Bicycle Corps was ultimately a short-lived experiment, eventually made obsolete by motorized vehicles, it stands as a powerful testament to the innovative spirit and the incredible toughness of the soldiers of the 25th Infantry. They were literally pioneers on two wheels, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. Ultimately, the story of the 24th and 25th Infantry Regiments is the story of the unsung logistics, backbone of frontier expansion. In military terms, logistics, the science of moving, supplying, and maintaining forces, is everything. Amateurs talk tactics, but professionals talk logistics. These regiments were the masters of frontier logistics. They guarded the supply depots, escorted the supply wagons, and ensured that the entire machinery of the frontier, both military and civilian, kept running. Without their protection, supply lines would have been severed. Without their labor, roads and communication lines wouldn't have existed. Without their steady presence, settlements would have been too vulnerable to survive and grow. They were the foundation upon which the more famous stories of the West were built. They created the stability and the infrastructure that allowed for economic development, for the growth of ranching and farming, and for the establishment of civil law and order. Their contribution was fundamental, yet it's a chapter of history that is too often left in the margins. These soldiers served with honor and distinction under incredibly difficult circumstances, facing not only the hardships of the frontier but also the prejudice of the society they were sworn to protect. Their legacy is not one of famous battles, but of something far more enduring. The quiet, steady, and indispensable work of building a nation. So, the next time you see a film or read a book about the Old West, take a moment to look beyond the cowboys and the gunslingers. Remember the disciplined soldiers of the 24th and 25th Infantry. See them standing guard on a lonely fort, escorting a settler's wagon, or laying the telegraph wire that connected a continent. They were the true pioneers, the builders, and the protectors of the American West. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey into a Lacernian corner of history. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Welcome back to our series. Today, we're diving into Chapter 10, a pivotal and often heartbreaking part of this story: hardships and racism. It's a chapter that reveals the immense challenges faced by these soldiers, not just from the enemy, but from within their own ranks in society. Imagine proving your worth, your skill, and your courage on the battlefield, only to be met with a wall of prejudice. This was the reality for so many. They faced constant discrimination from many white officers, settlers, and even the very government they swore to protect. It was a pervasive, demoralizing force that followed them from the barracks to the frontier. These weren't isolated incidents. It was a systemic issue. Many officers, steeped in the prejudices of the era, viewed them as inferior, incapable of the discipline and intelligence required of a true soldier. This mindset created an environment of constant tension and injustice. Despite their proven excellence in countless engagements, they were systematically denied promotions. A soldier could be the most skilled rider, the most accurate marksman, the bravest soul in a firefight, but if he was black, he would watch as less competent, less experienced white soldiers were promoted above him. It was a bitter pill to swallow. The respect they earned under fire often vanished the moment the smoke cleared. They were heroes in battle, but second-class citizens in camp. This denial wasn't just about rank. It was about dignity. It was a constant message from the establishment that their contributions, their sacrifices, were worth less. The inequality extended to the very tools of their trade. They were often issued inferior equipment-holder rifles, worn-out horses, and threadbare uniforms. Their forts and barracks were frequently the most neglected, with poor sanitation and inadequate supplies. And then there was the pay. For a long time, they were paid less than their white counterparts for doing the exact same dangerous work. Black soldiers received $10 a month, out of which $3 were deducted for clothing. White soldiers received $13 a month with no clothing deduction. This pay gap was a concrete, tangible symbol of the government's official policy of discrimination. It wasn't just an insult. It was a genuine hardship for them and their families. Recognition for their valor was minimal, while white soldiers were lauded as heroes for similar acts of bravery. Their accomplishments were often downplayed, ignored, or attributed to their white officers. Medals of honor were awarded, yes, but far less frequently than they were deserved. And the stories of their heroism rarely made it into the mainstream press. They were, in many ways, invisible heroes, fighting and dying for a country that refused to see them as equals. Think about the psychological toll of this constant battle for recognition, for basic respect. It's a weight that's hard for us to even comprehend today. Yet, and this is the most remarkable part of their story, their resilience and professionalism never faltered. Faced with this constant barrage of injustice, they could have become bitter, insubordinate, and ineffective, but they didn't. Instead, they channeled their energy into being the best. They maintained their discipline, kept their uniforms immaculate, and drilled relentlessly. They knew they had to be twice as good to be considered half as equal. Their desertion rates were among the lowest in the Army, a stunning testament to their dedication and character. This professionalism wasn't just about military bearing, it was a form of resistance. By being exemplary soldiers, they were directly challenging the racist stereotypes held against them. Every successful campaign, every act of bravery, every moment of unwavering discipline was a powerful statement. It said, "You can deny us promotions, you can give us poor equipment, you can pay us less, but you cannot break our spirit. You cannot deny our skill. We are soldiers, and we are among the best." Their commanders, even those who held personal prejudices, couldn't ignore their effectiveness on the frontier. They came to rely on their discipline and fighting ability, even if they wouldn't admit it publicly. The prejudice wasn't just from within the army. As they patrolled the West, they encountered hostility from the very settlers they were tasked to protect. Some settlers who had moved west with their own ingrained biases refused to be aided by black soldiers. There are accounts of towns where they were denied service, insulted, and treated with contempt. Can you imagine the irony? Risking your life to protect people who see you as less than human. It was a lonely and often thankless existence, caught between an army that devalued them and a civilian population that scorned them. But they found strength in each other. The bonds forged in the barracks and on patrol were incredibly strong. They created a community, a brotherhood that provided the support and validation they were denied from the outside world. They took pride in their regiments, the 9th and 10th Cavalry, the 24th and 25th Infantry. These weren't just military designations. They were symbols of their collective identity and resilience. They celebrated each other's successes, supported each other through hardships, and built a legacy of excellence against all odds. This chapter of their story is crucial because it frames their entire legacy. Their accomplishments on the battlefield are even more extraordinary when you understand the internal battles they were fighting every single day. They weren't just fighting hostile forces on the plains. They were fighting a war against racism, a war for dignity, and a war for their rightful place in American history. Their perseverance in the face of such overwhelming hardship is perhaps their greatest victory. It's a story of incredible strength, a testament to the power of the human spirit to endure, to strive, and to excel, even when the world is telling you that you can't. Their story serves as a powerful reminder that the path to equality is long and fraught with obstacles. It shows us that true heroism isn't just about what you do in the heat of battle, but how you carry yourself in the face of injustice. These men were more than just soldiers. They were pioneers who helped pave the way for future generations, proving that courage, honor, and patriotism know no color. Their legacy is a profound lesson in resilience that continues to inspire us today. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive into a difficult but essential part of the story. The strength these men showed is truly awe. If you found this meaningful, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more chapters of this incredible history. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our series. Today, we're diving into a chapter of history that's filled with unparalleled courage and undeniable heroism. We're talking about the Buffalo Soldiers who earned the nation's highest award for valor, the Medal of Honor. Their stories are not just about battles fought, but about a much larger fight for respect and equality. Let's set the stage. The late 19th century was a tumultuous time, especially in the American West. The Indian Wars were a series of complex and often brutal conflicts. In the midst of this, the Buffalo Soldiers, the African-American regiments of the U.S. Army, were on the front lines, tasked with some of the most dangerous missions imaginable. They built roads, protected settlers, escorted supply trains, and engaged in direct combat, all while facing a dual threat: the dangers of the frontier and the deep-seated prejudice of the society they swore to protect. It's one thing to fight for a nation that embraces you, but it's another thing entirely to fight with unwavering loyalty for a nation that still sees you as a second-class citizen. This is the incredible paradox at the heart of the Buffalo Soldiers' story. Their service was an act of profound patriotism and a powerful statement about their right to be recognized as equals, and recognized they were in the most significant way possible. During the Indian Wars alone, a staggering 18 Buffalo Soldiers were awarded the Medal of Honor. Let that number sink in. 18 men, whose bravery was so extraordinary, so far beyond the call of duty, that it could not be ignored. Today, we're going to share the stories of a few of these remarkable individuals. Their actions tell a story of quiet heroism that chipped away at prejudice, one heroic act at a time. Let's begin with Sergeant Henry Johnson of the 9th Cavalry. Picture this: October 1879, near the Milk River in Colorado. Johnson's troop is under a relentless, surprise attack by a much larger force of Ute warriors, pinned down, with casualties mounting. The situation looks hopeless. The soldiers are running desperately low on ammunition. Sergeant Johnson, seeing his comrades in peril, makes a decision that defies belief. He voluntarily leaves his protected position under a hail of gunfire and makes his way back to retrieve ammunition for his men. But he doesn't stop there. He then dedicates the rest of the battle to fighting from an exposed position, directing fire and ensuring the wounded are cared for. He essentially becomes the rock of the defense. His official citation reads that he braved the enemy's fire to get water for the wounded. But it was so much more than that. He was the glue that held the line together, preventing a total disaster. For his gallantry, Henry Johnson was awarded the Medal of Honor. His actions weren't just about survival. They were about a profound sense of duty to the men fighting alongside him. Next, we have the story of Sergeant George Jordan, also of the 9th Cavalry. His moment of heroism came in two separate, intense engagements. The first was in New Mexico in 1880. Jordan was commanding a small detachment of just 25 men when they were ambushed by over 100 Apache warriors. Led by the formidable Chief Victoria, outnumbered 4-1, Jordan didn't panic. He expertly directed his men to take cover in an old, abandoned stone corral. From this fortified position, they managed to repel wave after wave of attacks. It was a masterclass in defensive strategy and sheer grit. A year later, in New Mexico again, Jordan found himself in another desperate fight. He and a small group of soldiers were defending a supply train when they were attacked. Once again, outnumbered and outgunned, Jordan's leadership and calm under fire were the deciding factors. He held his ground, repelled the attack, and saved the vital supplies. For his incredible bravery across both of these actions, George Jordan was awarded the Medal of Honor. He proved that true leadership isn't about numbers. It's about courage and intelligence under pressure. Then there is Sergeant John Denny of the 9th Cavalry. In 1879, during a skirmish in the Los Alamos Canyon of New Mexico, Denny's troop was in a desperate fight. While battling a fierce opponent, he saw a fellow soldier fall, wounded and exposed in the open. Without a moment's hesitation, under a constant storm of bullets, Denny ran to his fallen comrade. He picked him up, carried him to a place of safety, and then immediately returned to the fight. Think about the selflessness required for that act. In a moment where your own survival is on the line, your first instinct is to save someone else. The official citation praises him for removing a wounded comrade under a heavy fire to a place of safety. It's a simple sentence for an act of immense bravery. John Denny's heroism is a testament to the powerful bond shared between these soldiers. They were more than a unit. They were a brotherhood. These are just 3 of the 18 stories. Each Medal of Honor recipient from the Buffalo Soldiers has a tale, just as owns men like Sergeant Thomas Boyne, who risked his life to rescue a wounded soldier under fire, or Corporal William O. Wilson, who braved a blizzard in hostile territory to carry vital dispatches, and Sergeant Benjamin Brown, who, despite being wounded in the stomach and arm, continued to command his detachment and fight off an attack until reinforcements arrived. What connects all these stories is a common thread of quiet, resolute heroism. These men weren't seeking fame or glory. They were soldiers, doing their duty under the most extreme circumstances. But in doing so, they achieved something far greater. Each act of valor, each Medal of Honor, was a crack in the wall of prejudice. It was undeniable proof of their skill, their loyalty, and their humanity. They forced the army and the nation to confront a simple truth: that courage knows no color. The battlefield is the ultimate equalizer. When you're under fire, you don't care about the skin color of the person next to you. You care about their character and their willingness to fight alongside you. The Buffalo Soldiers proved their character time and time again. Their legacy is not just in the medals they won, but in the perceptions they changed. They challenged the racist caricatures and stereotypes of the era through their professionalism and their incredible bravery. They weren't just fighting the battles assigned to them by the U.S. Army. They were fighting a battle for the soul of America, paving the way for future generations. The path to full equality was still long and difficult, as we know, but the foundation was being laid, brick by brick, by the heroic actions of these men. They demonstrated that African Americans were not only capable of serving their country, but of serving it with a level of distinction that few could match. Their medals were more than just awards. They were symbols of a promise, a declaration that they were an integral part of the American story. So when we remember the Buffalo Soldiers, let's remember the names: Henry Johnson, George Jordan, John Denny, and the 15 others who earned the Medal of Honor during this period. Let's remember their individual stories of courage. They were ordinary men who, when faced with extraordinary circumstances, responded with a level of bravery that is truly timeless. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that true heroism is about standing up for what's right, protecting those beside you, and serving a cause greater than yourself, even when the world is against you. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the lives of these incredible heroes. Their stories deserve to be told and remembered. If you found this chapter as inspiring as I did, please give this video a thumbs up, and do not forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next episode. We appreciate your support more than you know. Until next time, stay curious and take care. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we re-dive into a chapter of American history that is often overlooked, but is absolutely essential to understanding the preservation of our nation's most treasured natural landscapes. We're talking about the very first guardians of our national parks, the unsung heroes who laid the groundwork for the conservation movement as we know it today. Let's journey back to the turn of the 20th century, to the majestic wilderness of Yosemite and Sequoia National Parks. Imagine this: vast, rugged terrain, towering sequoias, and pristine wilderness that had just been designated for protection. But who was there to actually protect it? Before the establishment of the National Park Service in 1916, this monumental task fell to the U.S. Army, and specifically to the African American soldiers of the 24th Infantry and 9th Cavalry Regiments, better known as the Buffalo Soldiers. That's right, the first park rangers were, in fact, these dedicated and disciplined men. In the summers of 1899, 1903, and 1904, about 500 Buffalo Soldiers were dispatched from the Presidio of San Francisco to patrol the newly formed Sequoia and Yosemite National Parks. They weren't just soldiers. They were pioneers of preservation. Their mission was far from simple. They were tasked with a wide range of responsibilities that would define the role of a park ranger for generations to come. One of their most critical duties was to combat the rampant illegal poaching that threatened the park's wildlife. In an era where hunting regulations were sparse and enforcement was even sparser, these soldiers were the front line of defense for deer, bears, and the other incredible animals that called these parks home. They would patrol vast areas on horseback, often for weeks at a time, tracking down poachers and confiscating illegal firearms and traps. Their presence alone was a powerful deterrent, sending a clear message that these lands were now under protection. But their work didn't stop with wildlife. They were also charged with stopping illegal grazing. Ranchers would often drive their sheep and cattle into the high country meadows, which caused significant damage to the delicate ecosystems. The Buffalo Soldiers had the difficult job of evicting these trespassing herds, a task that required both authority and diplomacy. They were essentially protecting the park's fragile plant life from being trampled and overgrazed, ensuring the meadows would remain vibrant for future generations. Furthermore, they were tireless builders. The infrastructure we often take for granted in national parks today, the Buffalo Soldiers helped build it. They constructed roads and trails, making the parks more accessible for visitors. In fact, they completed the first usable road into the giant forest of Sequoia National Park and built an arboretum. Think about that every time you walk a historic trail in Yosemite or Sequoia. You might be treading a path first blazed by these incredible men. They were literally carving access into the wilderness while simultaneously protecting it. They also fought forest fires, a constant threat in the dry California summers, often with limited equipment, but with immense courage and determination. At the heart of this story is a remarkable leader, Captain Charles Young III, African American, to graduate from West Point. Captain Young was a man of extraordinary intellect, skill, and integrity. In 1903, he was appointed as the acting military superintendent of Sequoia National Park, making him the first African American to hold such a position. This was a monumental achievement in a deeply segregated America. Captain Young led his troops with a profound sense of dignity and a deep respect for the land. He wasn't just following orders. He was a true conservationist. He understood the intrinsic value of the wilderness and instilled that understanding in his men. Under his leadership, his troops built more miles of wagon roads than all three of the military superintendents who came before him combined. He managed the park with exceptional efficiency and foresight, negotiating with local landowners, developing better management practices, and ensuring the protection of the giant sequoias. His leadership was so effective and respected that at the end of his tenure, local community members petitioned for him to be reappointed, a testament to his impact. Charles Young and his men weren't just doing a job. They were proving that African American soldiers were not only capable but exemplary leaders in any field, including the brand new field of environmental stewardship. They faced the dual challenges of a harsh, untamed wilderness and the harsh realities of racial prejudice, and they excelled at every turn. The work of the Buffalo Soldiers in Yosemite and Sequoia represents a foundational moment for the American conservation movement. At a time when the very idea of setting aside land for preservation was new and controversial, they were the ones on the ground making it a reality. They demonstrated that protection wasn't just a concept, it was hard work. It was about patrolling, building, educating, and enforcing. They created a model for what a park ranger should be: a steward, a protector, an educator, and a builder. Their legacy is etched into the very landscape of these parks. From the trails they cleared to the forests they saved from fire, their contribution is immeasurable. They were instrumental in proving that national parks were not just a good idea, but a manageable one. Their success helped pave the way for the creation of the National Park Service. Just over a decade later, it is a powerful reminder that the story of conservation in America is a diverse and complex one, filled with heroes from all walks of life. The Buffalo Soldiers were guardians of the wilderness, and their dedication ensured that these cathedrals of nature would be preserved for all of us to enjoy today. Their story is a vital part of our national heritage, and it deserves to be told and celebrated. So next time you visit a national park, take a moment to think about its origins. Think about the brave men who patrolled these lands on horseback, who protected its wildlife, and who laid the very first stones of the paths we now walk. Think of Captain Charles Young and the Buffalo Soldiers, the original park rangers, whose legacy lives on in every towering tree and every protected vista. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the past. It's stories like these that enrich our understanding of the world around us. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more hidden histories. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next chapter. We'll see you in the next video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our series where we explore the lives of incredible historical figures who have shaped our world. Today, we're re-diving into the remarkable story of a man who shattered barriers and left an indelible mark on American history. Captain, and later Colonel, Charles Young. His life is a testament to perseverance, leadership, and an unwavering commitment to service in the face of overwhelming adversity. Born into slavery in Kentucky in 1864, just 1 year before the end of the Civil War, Charles Young's journey began at a time of profound change in the United States. His father, Gabriel Young, escaped enslavement to serve in the Union Army, instilling in his son a powerful sense of duty and patriotism. After the war, the family settled in Ripley, Ohio, a town known for its strong abolitionist community. It was here that young Charles excelled academically, graduating at the top of his integrated high school class. His intellectual gifts were undeniable, and he was encouraged by his parents to pursue higher education. This ambition led him to seek an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point. It was a monumental challenge. At the time, West Point was a deeply segregated and hostile environment for African Americans. Only 2 had graduated before him, and many who were admitted were forced out by a relentless barrage of prejudice and isolation. Young secured his appointment in 1884, but his 5 years at the academy were a crucible. He faced social ostracism, racial slurs, and the silent treatment from his fellow cadets. One classmate even tried to have him killed during a training exercise. Despite this immense pressure, Young refused to be broken. He persevered, focusing on his studies and military training, and he walked across the graduation stage, becoming the 3rd African American to conquer West Point. Upon graduating, 2nd Lieutenant Young was assigned to the 9th Cavalry, one of the famed Buffalo Soldier regiments. These were all black units commanded by white officers, and Young was now one of the very few black officers in the entire U.S. Army. He served on the frontier in states like Nebraska and Utah, where his duties ranged from supervising the construction of roads to mediating disputes. His competence and professionalism quickly earned him the respect of the soldiers under his command, who saw in him a leader who understood their struggles and championed their abilities. Young's career was not confined to the American West. He was soon appointed as a professor of military science and tactics at Wilberforce University in Ohio, a historically black college. This was a strategic move by the War Department, and it proved to be a pivotal moment. At Wilberforce, Young not only taught military discipline, but also became a mentor and a cultural leader. He taught French, German, and mathematics, and even helped establish the university's marching band. He was a Renaissance man, deeply invested in the intellectual and cultural development of his community. It was during this time that he formed a close friendship with his colleague, the renowned scholar and activist W.E.B. Du Bois, a relationship that would shape both of their perspectives on racial equality and service. His leadership skills were soon called upon again, this time with the 10th Cavalry. When the Spanish-American War broke out, Young, now a captain, commanded a squadron of the 9th Ohio Volunteer Infantry. Though his unit didn't see overseas combat, his leadership was noted. Later, he would serve in the Philippines, where he commanded troops in complex counterinsurgency operations, earning praise for his strategic mind and his humane treatment of local populations. Perhaps one of the most fascinating chapters of his career came in 1903, when he was appointed as the acting superintendent of Sequoia National Park in California. This made him the first African-American superintendent of a national park. Leading his troops of the 9th Cavalry, he took on the immense task of managing and protecting this vast wilderness. They built roads and trails, including a road to the base of the Morro Rock and a trail to the top of Mount Whitney, opening up the park for public access. They fought forest fires, cracked down on illegal poaching and logging, and established a model for park management that is still influential today. His work in the national parks is a powerful, yet often overlooked, part of his legacy. Young's career continued to ascend. He became a military attaché, a diplomat soldier, serving in Haiti and, most notably, in Liberia. In Liberia, he was tasked with reorganizing the country's army and infrastructure. He spent years there, building roads, training soldiers, and helping to secure the nation's sovereignty against encroaching colonial powers. For his exceptional service, the NAACP awarded him its highest honor, the Spingarn Medal, recognizing him as the person who had made the highest achievement for his race that year. By the time World War I erupted in Europe, Young was a lieutenant colonel, the highest-ranking African-American officer in the Army, and was in line for promotion to brigadier general. But the military establishment, unwilling to have a black general commanding white troops in a major conflict, looked for a way to stop his advancement. They forced him into a medical retirement, citing high blood pressure. Refusing to accept this injustice, Charles Young embarked on his most famous act of defiance. To prove his fitness for duty, he made an epic 500-mile horseback ride from his home in Wilberforce, Ohio, to Washington, D.C. This incredible journey captured the nation's attention and highlighted the hypocrisy of his forced retirement. While the Army did reinstate him to active duty, it was a bittersweet victory. He was promoted to the rank of colonel, but it came too late for him to command troops in Europe during the war. His final assignment took him back to West Africa, on a mission to Nigeria. It was there, in 1922, that he passed away from a kidney infection. His body was eventually returned to the United States and buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery, a final recognition of his lifetime of service. Charles Young's life was a masterclass in overcoming obstacles. He was a soldier, a diplomat, a park superintendent, a musician, a linguist, and a mentor. He navigated a system designed to see him fail and rose to niveaux of success that were almost unimaginable. For an African-American man of his time, he wasn't just a trailblazer. He was a one-man wrecking ball against the walls of prejudice. He proved, through his actions and his character, that excellence knows no color. His legacy inspired generations of African-American soldiers and leaders, including the Tuskegee Airmen, and continues to be a source of inspiration for all who fight for equality and justice. Thank you so much for joining me today to learn about the incredible life of Colonel Charles Young. His story is a vital part of American history that deserves to be told and remembered. If you found this story as inspiring as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the lives of history's unsung heroes. Drop a comment below and let me know what you found most remarkable about his journey. We'll see you in the next video. Hey everyone, welcome back to our deep dive into history. Today, we're stepping back to 1898, to the sun-scorched landscapes of Cuba during the Spanish-American War. This isn't just a story about territories and treaties. It's a story of incredible courage, overlooked heroes, and a fight for recognition that was just as fierce as the battles themselves. We're talking about the Buffalo Soldiers. Now, who were the Buffalo Soldiers? These were seasoned all-black regiments of the U.S. Army, the 9th and 10th Cavalry, and the 24th and 25th Infantry. Formed after the Civil War, they had already earned a legendary reputation on the American frontier. When the call came to liberate Cuba from Spanish rule, these veteran soldiers were among the first to be deployed. They were disciplined, experienced, and ready for a new, challenging battlefield. Their journey to Cuba was anything but easy. Right from the start, they faced the harsh realities of segregation. While they were sailing from Tampa, Florida, they endured worse conditions than their white counterparts, but their spirit was unbreakable. They were soldiers on a mission, and they carried with them not just their rifles, but the hopes of a people striving for respect and equality. As they landed on Cuban soil, they stepped into a humid, tropical environment, a world away from the American West. They knew so well. The fight ahead would test their limits in every way imaginable. The Cuban campaign was grueling. The Spanish forces were well entrenched. The terrain was difficult, and tropical diseases like yellow fever and malaria were a constant, deadly threat. In fact, disease would claim more American lives than combat. The Buffalo Soldiers, however, proved exceptionally resilient. Some believe their supposed natural immunity made them better suited for the tropics, a racial stereotype of the time. The reality was their incredible discipline, physical toughness, and the exceptional leadership of their officers. They took sanitation seriously, followed orders diligently, and maintained high morale even in the face of sickness and adversity. This resilience made them an indispensable part of the American invasion force. One of their first major engagements was the Battle of Las Casimas. On June 24, 1898, American forces, including the 10th Cavalry, ran into a Spanish ambush. In the chaos of dense jungle fighting, the Buffalo Soldiers were a rock of stability. They laid down suppressive fire, allowing other units, including the famed Rough Riders, to advance. Eyewitnesses reported how they fought with a cool, steady bravery that calmed the nerves of the less experienced volunteer troops. They weren't just participating. They were leading the charge and setting a standard for courage under fire. This brings us to the most legendary moment of the war, the assault on the San Juan Heights on July 1st, 1898. This was the decisive battle. The Spanish held a strong defensive position on Kettle Hill and San Juan Hill, overlooking the American approach. The advance was stalled under withering enemy fire. Men were pinned down, and the situation looked dire. It was in this critical moment that the Buffalo Soldiers of the 9th and 10th Cavalry, alongside the 24th and 25th Infantry, made history. Think of the scene. Theodore Roosevelt and his Rough Riders are pinned down at the base of Kettle Hill. The air is thick with smoke and the sound of gunfire. It asks the Buffalo Soldiers who provide the crucial covering fire that allows the Rough Riders to begin their famous charge. But they didn't just provide support. They charged right alongside them. Black and white soldiers, fighting together, surged up that hill, united in a common purpose. First, Lieutenant John J. Blackjack Pershing, who commanded the 10th Cavalry, later said, "The entire command moved forward as coolly as though the buzzing of bullets was the humming of bees." After taking Kettle Hill, they didn't stop. They advanced across the valley toward the main objective, San Juan Hill. Again, the Buffalo Soldiers of the 24th Infantry were at the forefront of the assault. They charged up the steep, fortified slope, cutting through barbed wire and braving a hailstorm of bullets. Their bravery was undeniable. They were instrumental in breaking the Spanish lines and securing the victory that would effectively end the war in Cuba. 5 Buffalo Soldiers would be awarded the Medal of Honor for their extraordinary heroism during these battles. But what happened after the smoke cleared? How was this incredible story told back home? Well, this is where the story takes a frustrating turn. The American press, hungry for a hero, focused almost exclusively on Theodore Roosevelt and his volunteer unit, the Rough Riders. Headlines celebrated Roosevelt's charge, often cropping the Buffalo Soldiers out of the picture entirely, both literally and figuratively. Their contributions were downplayed, ignored, or simply credited to others. Even Roosevelt himself, who had praised the black soldiers' bravery in the heat of battle, later made statements that diminished their role. In his writings, he suggested they needed white officers to lead them effectively, a comment that stung the very men who had fought and bled alongside him. It was a classic example of the deep-seated prejudice of the era. The narrative was controlled by those in power, and it was a narrative that did not have room for black heroes. The Buffalo Soldiers had helped win the war, but they were losing the battle for recognition. Despite the misrepresentation, the truth couldn't be completely suppressed. Within the military, their reputations soared. Officers who served with them knew what they had accomplished. White soldiers who fought beside them on San Juan Hill told stories of their courage for years to come. The black community in America celebrated them as heroes, a source of immense pride. Their performance in Cuba was proof positive that African Americans could serve with distinction and patriotism, challenging the racist caricatures that were so common at the time. The legacy of the Buffalo Soldiers in the Spanish-American War is complex, but powerful. They proved their mettle on an international stage, helping to establish the United States as a global power. Their heroism paved the way for future generations of black soldiers and was a crucial, if often overlooked, chapter in the long struggle for civil rights. They fought for a country that didn't always fight for them, serving with a loyalty and valor that demanded respect. Their story is a reminder that history is filled with unsung heroes, and it's our job to make sure their voices are finally heard. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the past. It's so important to remember these stories of courage and perseverance. If you found this video insightful, please hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next chapter in history. We'll see you in the next video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're rediving deep into a complex and often overlooked chapter of American and world history, the Philippine-American War, and specifically, the profound and challenging experience of the black soldiers who served there. After the smoke cleared from the Spanish-American War in 1898, the United States found itself in a new role, a colonial power. The Treaty of Paris handed over control of the Philippines from Spain to the U.S., but the Filipino people, led by Emilio Aguinaldo, had their own vision. Independence, what followed was not a simple transition, but a brutal 3-year conflict. Into this crucible were sent some of the most seasoned soldiers in the U.S. Army, the Black Regiments, famously known as the Buffalo Soldiers. These were the men of the 9th and 10th Cavalry and the 24th and 25th Infantry. Having already proven their mettle on the American frontier, they were now deployed halfway across the world to a place most had never even heard of. They packed their gear, said their goodbyes, and boarded ships for a long, uncertain journey across the Pacific, trading the arid plains of the West for the dense, humid jungles of Southeast Asia. When they arrived, they were immediately thrown into a type of warfare that was entirely different from what they had experienced before. The Philippine-American War quickly devolved into a grueling guerrilla conflict. Instead of open battlefields, they faced an enemy that knew the land intimately, an enemy that could strike from the dense jungle and vanish just as quickly. The conditions were absolutely punishing. They contended with torrential monsoons that turned the ground to thick mud sweltering, heat and humidity that could drain a soldier in minutes, and a constant barrage of tropical diseases like malaria and dysentery which often proved more deadly than enemy bullets. These soldiers had to adapt rapidly, conducting long-range patrols through unforgiving terrain, often cut off from supply lines for extended periods. They waded through swamps, hacked their way through thick vegetation, and were always on alert for an ambush. It was a war of endurance, a test of both physical and mental fortitude. Reports from the time praised their discipline and effectiveness. Commanders, both black and white, noted their skill in jungle tracking and their resilience in the face of these incredible hardships. They were instrumental in many key campaigns, earning a reputation for their tenacity and courage under fire. But beneath the surface of time and the military duties, a deep and troubling moral conflict was brewing for these men. Irate, wary black Americans, sent to suppress the independence movement of another non-white people. It was an irony that was not lost on them. Back home, they were subjected to the brutalities of Jim Crow segregation, denied basic rights, and faced constant racism. Yet, in the Philippines, they were the enforcers of a colonial policy that denied Filipinos the very self-determination they themselves yearned for. The Filipinos were quick to recognize this paradox. They launched a targeted propaganda campaign aimed directly at the black soldiers. They distributed leaflets and posters, written in English, that asked pointed questions. Why were they fighting for a country that lynched and oppressed their own people? Why were they helping the white man subjugate another colored race? They called the black soldiers the Negroes with the white men as hearts and urged them to desert, to join their struggle for freedom against a common oppressor. These messages hit home. Letters written by black soldiers back to their families and to African-American newspapers realized a profound sense of internal conflict. One soldier, Sergeant Major John W. Galloway, wrote, "I was not raised to carry a gun against people who are fighting for their freedom." Another, Corporal David Farrow of the 25th Infantry, famously wrote, "We are now arrayed to meet a people who are fighting for their liberty, just as the Cubans were. I will not fire a shot against them." This sentiment was widespread. The soldiers began to see the Filipinos not just as an enemy, but as a people struggling for their own liberty. drawing parallels to their own fight for civil rights in America. This growing unease led to one of the most remarkable and controversial events of the war, the defection of Corporal David Fagan. Fagan, a soldier in the 24th Infantry, was so moved by the Filipino cause and so disillusioned with the racism he faced in the U.S. Army that he deserted and joined the Filipino Revolutionary Forces. He became a captain in their army, known as General Fagan. By the Filipinos, he was so effective at leading guerrilla attacks against his former comrades that the U.S. military placed a massive bounty on his head. Fagan became a folk hero to the Filipinos and a symbol of the deep moral crisis black soldiers experienced, while his actions were an act of treason in the eyes of the U.S. Army. For many, he represented a powerful protest against racial injustice. On a global scale, the Philippine-American War, for these black soldiers, became a transformative experience. It was more than just another military campaign. It was a political and racial awakening. Fighting thousands of miles from home, they began to see their own struggle for equality in a new, international context. They saw how ideas of race and empire were being used to justify the subjugation of people, PIFU of color, all over the world. This wasn't just an American problem. It was a global one. When these veterans returned to the United States, they brought this new awareness with them. They came back not as naive young men, but as seasoned soldiers who had seen the workings of empire firsthand. They had fought for a country that still refused to treat them as full citizens, and they had been asked to deny freedom to a people whose struggle mirrored their own. This experience galvanized many of them. Returning veterans became more vocal in the burgeoning civil rights movement. They contributed to the discourse in black newspapers. They joined political organizations, and they added their voices to the growing chorus demanding racial justice. The seeds of a global consciousness about race and colonialism, planted in the jungles of the Philippines, began to sprout within the African American community. The war forced a difficult conversation about loyalty, identity, and the meaning of freedom. It highlighted the hypocrisy of fighting for liberty abroad while being denied it at home. The story of the Buffalo Soldiers in the Philippines is a powerful reminder that history is never simple. It's a story of incredible bravery, deep moral conflict, and the enduring global struggle for justice and human dignity. Thank you so much for joining us for this important discussion. It's a complex part of our history, and it's vital that we continue to explore it. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into history. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next episode. We'll see you next time. Welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we re-dive into Chapter 16, the early 1900s, an era of profound change for the Buffalo Soldiers. The romanticized image of the American frontier was fading into the sunset. But for these legendary regiments, a new dawn was breaking, bringing with it new challenges and new roles. Imagine the turn of the century. The vast, untamed West that had defined America for a generation was now crisscrossed with railroads and dotted with towns. The so-called Indian Wars were over, and the frontier, as they know it, was officially declared closed. For the men of the 9th and 10th Cavalry and the 24th and 25th Infantry, this meant their primary mission for the past 3 decades had fundamentally shifted. So, what happens when a frontier army has no frontier left to tame? Do they simply fade away? Not the Buffalo Soldiers. Their story was far from over. Instead of disappearing, their purpose evolved. The army was modernizing, and these veteran soldiers, hardened by years of service in some of the country's most unforgiving landscapes, were the perfect candidates to shape the next generation. They became the trainers, the mentors, the seasoned sergeants who took raw, young recruits and forged them into disciplined soldiers. Think about the value of that experience. A young man joining the army wouldn't just learn from a textbook. He'd learn from someone who had survived blizzards in the Dakotas, skirmishes in Arizona, and the grueling pace of a cavalry march across Texas. These veterans were living history, passing down not just skills, but a legacy of resilience and professionalism. Their new duties weren't confined to the training grounds. The nation's borders were becoming more defined and more contested, particularly the long, winding border with Mexico. This was a time of political turmoil, and the Buffalo Soldiers were dispatched to patrol this volatile region. They became a crucial force for stability, tasked with border patrol duties, pursuing bandits, and acting as a diplomatic presence in a tense environment. They were peacekeepers, lawmen, and soldiers all rolled into one, maintaining order and protecting American settlements along the borderline. Their service here was vital, yet it's a chapter of their history that is often overlooked. They weren't just chasing outlaws. They were helping to secure the very sovereignty of the nation's southern frontier. While some regiments served stateside, others continued to prove their mettle abroad. Following the Spanish-American War, the Buffalo Soldiers played a significant role in the Philippines. This was a complex and difficult conflict, and their service there was marked by the same courage and discipline they had shown throughout their history. They were fighting in a foreign land, under difficult conditions, navigating a complex cultural and political landscape. Back home, they also took on a role that might surprise you. They were some of the nation's first park rangers. Before the National Park Service was formally established, the U.S. Army was tasked with protecting newly designated national parks like Yosemite and Sequoia. Buffalo Soldier cavalry units patrolled these pristine wilderness areas, protecting them from poachers and illegal logging, and even building some of the first trails and infrastructure for visitors. They were guardians of America's natural treasures, a testament to their versatility and dedication. However, even as they served with honor, the winds of change were blowing through the entire military structure. The early 20th century was a period of reform and reorganization for the U.S. Army. New technologies like the automobile and the airplane were beginning to hint at a future where horse cavalry might become obsolete. More importantly, the social fabric of the country was being questioned. The very idea of a segregated military was coming under increasing scrutiny. While the Buffalo Soldiers had proven their worth 100 times over, they were still forced to serve in separate units, led almost exclusively by white officers, and often denied the respect and opportunities afforded to their white counterparts. This period, from the early 1900s through World War I, was the beginning of the end for this system. The conversations were starting. Activists, journalists, and the soldiers themselves began to more vocally challenge the injustice of segregation. They had served with distinction in every conflict. They had built forts, strung telegraph wires, protected settlers, and guarded national parks. They had done everything asked of them and more. The question was becoming louder. Why should they have to do it in a separate, unequal army? The performance of the Buffalo Soldiers provided a powerful, undeniable argument for integration. Their legacy of excellence was a constant challenge to the prejudice that kept the military divided. This era of transition was complex. It was a time of immense pride in their ongoing service, but also one of growing frustration with the limitations placed upon them. The Buffalo Soldiers of the early 20th century were not just soldiers. They were pioneers of social change. They were laying the groundwork for the eventual desegregation of the armed forces, a landmark moment that would finally happen after World War II. Their quiet professionalism, their unwavering commitment to duty, and their courage in the face of both foreign enemies and domestic prejudice set the stage for a more just and equitable military. They were the bridge between the old frontier army and the modern, integrated force of the future. Their story in this period is a powerful reminder that progress is often a slow, steady march, carried forward by the dedication of those who refuse to be defined by the limitations of their time. Thank you for joining us for this chapter. The story of the Buffalo Soldiers is a vital part of the American experience, and we're honored to share it with you. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next episode. We'll see you then. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our series. Today, we're diving into Chapter 17, a pivotal and often overlooked chapter in military history. The story of the Buffalo Soldiers during World War I, and the subsequent decline of their legendary regiments. It's a story of patriotism tested by prejudice, a tale of dedication in the face of discrimination. As the world plunged into the Great War, a conflict that promised to make the world safe for democracy, you would expect America's most seasoned soldiers to be at the forefront. The Buffalo Soldiers, with their decades of experience and proven valor, were more than ready. They were eager to prove their loyalty on the battlefields of Europe. However, The bitter reality of racial policy in early 20th century America had other plans for them. When the United States officially entered the war in 1917, the national mood was one of urgent mobilization. Millions of men were drafted and trained. The Buffalo Soldiers, already a professional fighting force, should have been a tremendous asset. But instead of being sent to the trenches as cohesive, experienced units, they were largely held back. The prevailing racial attitudes of the time meant that the military leadership was hesitant, even unwilling, to deploy black soldiers in prominent combat roles alongside white troops. Imagine the frustration. These were men who had dedicated their lives to the U.S. Army, who had fought in the Indian Wars, the Spanish-American War, and the Philippine-American War. They had garrisoned the frontier, built roads, and protected settlers. Their service record was impeccable. Yet, when the biggest war in history erupted, they were largely sidelined. The deep-seated fear was that allowing black soldiers to fight and kill Europeans would challenge the racial hierarchy back home. It was a tragic irony, fighting for democracy abroad while being denied its full promise at home. So, what happened to these veteran horsemen of the 9th and 10th Cavalry and the foot soldiers of the 24th and 25th Infantry? For the most part, they were assigned to duties far from the glamour and glory of the European front lines. Many were tasked with guarding vital infrastructure in the United States, like patrolling the U.S.-Mexico border, which was still a volatile region. Others were stationed in places like the Philippines and Hawaii, maintaining order and performing garrison duties. While these roles were essential for national security, they were a far cry from the trenches of France, the skills they had honed for decades. Marksmanship, horsemanship, tactical maneuvering were not put to the ultimate test in the Great War. Instead, many found themselves relegated to support roles. They became laborers, stevedores, and supply personnel. They built roads, dug ditches, and loaded and unloaded the countless tons of supplies needed to fuel the war machine. This work was grueling, physically demanding, and absolutely critical to the war effort. Without these logistics and labor battalions, the American expeditionary forces could not have functioned, but it was often thankless work, performed far from the action and with little to no public recognition. It was a deliberate exclusion, a strategic decision to keep black soldiers out of the main fight. It was a clear message that, in the eyes of the military establishment, their primary value was seen in labor, not combat leadership or heroism. This exclusion from the main stage of World War I reveals a profound and painful truth about America at the time. The nation was willing to accept the service and even the sacrifice of its black citizens, but only on its own restrictive terms. The ideals of liberty and equality, so loudly proclaimed in wartime propaganda, did not fully extend to the very men who wore the nation's uniform. It was a stark reminder of America's unfinished promise. While fighting a war for freedom overseas, the country was still grappling with its own deep-seated inequalities. The experience of the Buffalo Soldiers in World War I stands in contrast to other black units, like the 369th Infantry Regiment. The Harlem Hellfighters, who were assigned to the French Army and fought with extraordinary distinction. Their success only highlights what the veteran Buffalo Soldier regiments could have achieved if given the chance. The decision to sideline them was not based on their ability, but on their race. Following the war, the world changed rapidly, and so did warfare. The era of the horse cavalry, the domain where the 9th and 10th had built their legacy, was coming to a swift end. Tanks, airplanes, and machine guns now dominated the battlefield. The romantic image of the cavalry charge was replaced by the brutal reality of trench warfare and mechanized assaults. For the Buffalo Soldier regiments, this shift marked the beginning of their decline. Their roles became increasingly ceremonial, or were phased out altogether. The 10th Cavalry, for example, was one of the last mounted regiments to give up its horses in the 1940s. It was the end of an era. The proud traditions and the unique identity forged on the American frontier began to fade as the military modernized and, eventually, desegregated after World War II. Yet, despite this slow decline and the injustices they faced, the legacy of the Buffalo Soldiers did not disappear. It couldn't. It lived on in the very fabric of the U.S. Army. The discipline, the professionalism, and the unwavering courage they demonstrated for over half a century set a standard. They proved, beyond any doubt, that soldiers of color were as capable, as brave, and as patriotic as any others. Their legacy is a testament to the human spirit's ability to persevere and excel even in the face of systemic adversity. They served with honor even when their own country did not always honor them in return. The story of their exclusion from World War I is not just a sad footnote. It is a crucial part of our history that reminds us of the long and arduous journey toward equality. The spirit of the Buffalo Soldiers, their resilience, their pride, their motto, we will continue to inspire future generations of Black service members who would go on to break down barriers and rise to the highest ranks of the military. Their story is a powerful reminder that true patriotism is not about blind obedience, but about serving a nation while simultaneously striving to make it live up to its highest ideals. Thank you so much for joining me today to explore this complex and important chapter. The story of the Buffalo Soldiers is one of triumph and tragedy, of service and sacrifice. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up. And do you want to forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't want to miss the next part of our journey. We'll see you in the next video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we journey to a pivotal moment in American history, a year that marked both an end and a new beginning. 1948. This is the story of how the long, dusty trail of segregation in the United States military finally reached its destination. For decades, African American soldiers had served their country with unwavering valor, yet were forced to do so in separate, often unequal, units. The Buffalo Soldiers, the legendary 9th and 10th Cavalry and the 24th and 25th Infantry Regiments were the embodiment of this paradox. From the Indian Wars to the Spanish-American War, from the Philippines to the battlefields of Europe, they had proven their courage, their skill, and their patriotism time and time again. They fought for a nation that did not always fight for them, earning a reputation for tenacity and bravery that was respected by their adversaries and, eventually, their countrymen. Their story is one of relentless pursuit, not just of enemies on the battlefield, but of dignity and equality at home. They endured prejudice and systemic discrimination, all while wearing the uniform of the United States Army. They built roads, protected settlers, guarded mail routes, and fought in some of the nation's most critical conflicts. Through it all, they held their heads high, creating a legacy of honor that could not be ignored. They weren't just soldiers, they were pioneers, pushing the boundaries of what was possible and demanding the respect they had so rightfully earned. The world had changed dramatically after World War II. The fight against fascism and tyranny abroad had cast a harsh light on the injustices of segregation back home. The hypocrisy was becoming too glaring to overlook. How could America champion freedom across the globe while denying it to its own citizens, especially those who had risked their lives for that very ideal? The pressure was mounting, both from civil rights activists and from within the military itself. The exemplary service of units like the Tuskegee Airmen and the Buffalo Soldiers had proven beyond any doubt that skill and bravery knew no color. Then came the moment of monumental change. On July 26, 1948, President Harry S. Truman, a man who had witnessed the contributions of African American soldiers firsthand, took a decisive step. He signed Executive Order 9981. The Order's language was clear and powerful. It is hereby declared to be the policy of the President that there shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed services without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin. This wasn't just a suggestion. It was a command. The walls of segregation in the military were officially ordered to come down. For the Buffalo Soldiers, this order was the culmination of their long, arduous fight. It was a validation of nearly a century of struggle, a recognition that their sacrifices had finally paved the way for a more just future. The journey had been long, from the dusty plains of the American West to the halls of the White House, but their perseverance had paid off. The very existence of their segregated regiments had been a protest against inequality, and now, that protest had been heard. With the implementation of Executive Order 9981, the historic Buffalo Soldier regiments were gradually deactivated and their soldiers integrated into other units. The 9th and 10th Cavalry, the 24th and 25th Infantry, their colors were furled for the last time. It was a bittersweet moment. An era had ended. The disbandment of these legendary units was, in a way, the ultimate sign of their success. Their purpose to prove that black soldiers were equal to any other had been so thoroughly achieved that their separate existence was no longer necessary. But the end of the regiments did not mean the end of their spirit. Far from it, the legacy of the Buffalo Soldiers endured, woven into the very fabric of the newly integrated armed forces. Their spirit of resilience, discipline, and ready and forward attitude lived on in the hearts and minds of every soldier who followed. They had laid the foundation, and a new chapter of integrated service was beginning, built upon their incredible history. Their story became a powerful symbol of the long march toward equality, a reminder that change is possible, even in the face of immense obstacles. The integration of the military wasn't an overnight process. It took years of effort, challenges, and cultural shifts to fully realize Truman's vision. But the die had been cast in 1948. The path forward was clear. Soldiers of all races would now train together, fight together, and live together. The U.S. military would begin to look more like the diverse nation it was sworn to protect. The spirit of the Buffalo Soldiers didn't just disappear. It multiplied, spreading throughout every branch and every rank of the armed forces. Today, the legacy of the Buffalo Soldiers is celebrated in museums, memorials, and history books. Their story teaches us about courage, honor, and the powerful impact of perseverance. It stands as a testament to the fact that fighting for one's country and fighting for one's rights can be, and often are, the very same battle. The end of segregation in the military was not just a policy change. It was a promise fulfilled and a new promise. A promise of an America that strives to live up to its highest ideals of liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much for joining us on this historical journey. The story of the Buffalo Soldiers is a vital part of our shared heritage, and it's one we should never forget. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more stories like this. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next video. We'll see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back. We've reached the final chapter in our journey through the incredible history of the Buffalo Soldiers. Today, we're talking about legacy and memory, about how a crucial piece of American history was almost lost, and how it's being rediscovered today. For the better part of a century, the story of the Buffalo Soldiers faded from the public consciousness after their regiments were disbanded. Their contributions were largely overlooked in mainstream history books and popular culture. Think about the classic westerns you've seen. How many featured the brave black cavalrymen who patrolled those same frontiers? Their narrative was overshadowed, a casualty of the very systemic racism they fought against both on and off the battlefield. It's a somber reminder of how Israeli history can be shaped by who gets to tell the story. The memories were kept alive, of course, within families, in black communities, and by dedicated historians who refused to let their legacy die. But for the wider world, it was as if they had vanished. But history has a way of reasserting itself. In recent decades, a powerful wave of rediscovery has begun. The tide started to turn thanks to the tireless work of historians, descendants, and community activists who demanded that these soldiers be given their rightful place in the American story. This resurgence has taken many forms, each one a vital piece in reconstructing this forgotten legacy. Museums have become crucial spaces for this revival. The Buffalo Soldier National Museum in Houston, Texas, for example, stands as a monumental tribute. It's not just a collection of artifacts. It's a center for education and remembrance, housing everything from uniforms and weaponry to personal letters and photographs. Walking through its halls, you're not just learning facts. You're connecting with the individual lives of these men. Similar exhibits have sprung up across the country, from Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, to the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. Each display is a beacon, illuminating a history that was kept in the dark for too long. Memorials and monuments are also rising, literally carving the legacy of the Buffalo Soldiers into the American landscape. In 1992, a stunning monument, sculpted by Eddie Dixon, was dedicated at Fort Leavenworth. It depicts a Buffalo Soldier on horseback, a powerful and permanent symbol of their presence and sacrifice. Other statues and plaques now mark the trails they blazed and the forts they manned, from the Presidio in San Francisco to parks in the Sierra Nevada. These physical markers serve as constant, public reminders that these soldiers were here, that they mattered, and that their story is an inseparable part of the nation's heritage. And of course, there's the power of popular culture. Films and documentaries have played a huge role in bringing the Buffalo Soldiers back into the mainstream conversation. While Hollywood has been slow to catch up, movies like Glory, though about the Civil War, opened the door for more stories about black soldiers. Documentaries on channels like PBS and the History Channel have meticulously detailed their campaigns, and even fictional portrayals, when done with respect and historical accuracy, can introduce their legend to a whole new generation. These narratives help us visualize their struggles and triumphs, transforming them from dusty historical figures into living, breathing heroes. But the legacy of the Buffalo Soldiers isn't just about museums and movies. It is a living legacy that continues to resonate within one of America's most important institutions, the military. The principles of discipline, courage, and unwavering loyalty that defined the Buffalo Soldiers have become foundational pillars of modern military culture. When they enlisted, they faced inferior equipment, hostile commanders, and a society that denied them basic rights. Yet, they consistently posted the lowest desertion rates in the entire U.S. Army. This incredible professionalism in the face of adversity set a standard of excellence. Their performance shattered racist myths about the capabilities of black soldiers and paved the way for future generations. The integration of the armed forces, officially ordered by President Truman in 1948, didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the direct result of the undeniable record of service established by units like the Buffalo Soldiers and the Tuskegee Airmen. Their legacy is seen today in a military that, while still striving for perfect equality, is one of the most diverse institutions in America. High-ranking officers, like General Colin Powell, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, have often cited the Buffalo Soldiers as a source of inspiration, acknowledging that they stand on the shoulders of these pioneers. The very ethos of the modern American soldier: resilience, honor, and duty is a reflection of the spirit first embodied by these men. Ultimately, remembering the Buffalo Soldiers is about more than just correcting a historical omission. It is an act of remembering America itself in all its complexity, with all its contradictions and its ongoing struggle for a more perfect union. Their story is a microcosm of the American journey toward equality. It's a story of patriotism in the face of prejudice, of service to a nation that didn't always serve them in return. They were pioneers, explorers, protectors, and patriots. They helped build the West, protected national parks, fought in foreign wars, and upheld the law, all while fighting a daily battle for their own dignity and humanity. Their narrative forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our past, but it also offers a powerful lesson in resilience and hope. It shows us that true patriotism isn't blind loyalty. It's a commitment to the ideals of a nation, even when the nation itself falls short of those ideals. It's about fighting to make the country better, to push it closer to its promise of liberty and justice for all. By remembering the Buffalo Soldiers, we honor their individual sacrifices, and we also gain a deeper, more honest understanding of what it means to be an American. Their legacy is not just black history, it is quintessentially American history. Their memory challenges us to continue the work they started, to keep pushing for equality, and to ensure that no story of courage and sacrifice is ever forgotten again. Thank you so much for joining me on this entire series. It has been an honor to share the story of the Buffalo Soldiers with you. If you found this series meaningful, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss our future explorations into history. We'll see you in the next video. As we draw the curtain on this incredible saga, we find ourselves at the heart of the matter. What do the Buffalo Soldiers truly represent in our world today? Their story is more than just a chapter in a history book. It's a living, breathing testament to the power of the human spirit. It's a narrative that echoes through the generations, reminding us of what it means to stand tall against the fiercest of storms. Imagine, for a moment, the weight they carried. Not just the weight of their gear, their rifles, or the scorching sun on their backs as they patrolled the vast, unforgiving frontier. They carried the crushing weight of prejudice, the sting of disrespect, and the burden of proving their worth in a nation that often refused to see it. Yet, they didn't just carry this weight, they transformed it. They forged it into a shield of resilience, a sword of honor, and a legacy of strength born directly from adversity. This is the first great lesson from the Buffalo Soldiers. True strength isn't about the absence of hardship. It's about what you do when hardship finds you. It's about looking adversity square in the eye and saying, "You will not break me." The desolate plains, the rugged mountains, the constant threat of conflict, these were the crucibles that tested their mettle. But the deepest challenge was the systemic prejudice they faced every single day. They were paid less, given inferior equipment, and stationed in the most remote and difficult outposts. Yet, they didn't just endure. They excelled. They built roads, strung telegraph lines, protected settlers, and engaged in countless battles, all while being denied the basic respect afforded to their white counterparts. Their service records are filled with accounts of incredible bravery and unwavering dedication. They had the lowest desertion rates in the entire frontier army. Think about that. In the face of every reason to give up, to walk away, they chose to stay. They chose to serve. This wasn't just a job for them. It was a mission. It was a declaration that their commitment to their country was unconditional, even when their country's commitment to them was not. Their strength wasn't just physical. It was a profound moral and spiritual fortitude. This brings us to the second, and perhaps most poignant, part of their legacy. Service in the face of prejudice. It's a concept that is almost hard to comprehend. How do you pledge allegiance to a flag that doesn't fully pledge allegiance to you? How do you defend a nation that often fails to defend your own rights? The Buffalo Soldiers answered these questions not with words, but with unwavering action. Their very existence was an act of defiance against the prevailing bigotry of the era. By simply putting on the uniform and executing their duties with unparalleled professionalism, they were challenging the very foundation of racial stereotypes. They were demonstrating, day in and day out, that courage, skill, and loyalty were not confined to one race. Their service was a powerful statement. It said, "We are Americans. We will protect this nation. We will help build this nation, and we will do it with honor, regardless of how you see us." They served in the Indian Wars, the Spanish-American War, the Philippine-American War, and even as the first National Park Rangers, protecting our natural treasures before the National Park Service was even created. In every role, they brought a level of dedication that was second to none. They were protectors, builders, and pioneers. Their service wasn't just about following orders. It was about laying the groundwork for a future where their children, and their children as children, might be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. They served a nation that was still struggling to live up to its own ideals, and in doing so, they pushed that nation closer to fulfilling its promise of liberty and justice for all. Their service was a profound act of patriotism, one that demanded a reevaluation of what it meant to be a hero, a soldier, and an American. And this all culminates in the single, timeless, and most powerful lesson the Buffalo Soldiers have bequeathed to us. Honor has no color. It's a simple truth, but one that humanity has struggled with for centuries. Honor is not black or white, red or brown. Honor is a choice. It's a code of conduct. It's about integrity, courage, and a commitment to something larger than yourself. The Buffalo Soldiers embodied this truth. Their honor was forged in the heat of battle, tested in the isolation of the frontier, and polished by the friction of prejudice. It was an honor that could not be tarnished by insults or diminished by inequality. When Native American tribes first called them Buffalo Soldiers, it was a sign of respect for their fierce fighting ability and their dark, curly hair that resembled a buffalo's mane. The buffalo was a sacred animal, revered for its strength and endurance. This name, given by their adversaries, became a badge of honor that they wore with immense pride. It was a recognition of their character that transcended the racial divides of the time. In the eyes of those who faced them on the battlefield, their skin color became secondary to their formidable spirit. They weren't just soldiers of a particular race. They were warriors. This lesson is the enduring spirit of the Buffalo Soldiers. It's a message that needs to be heard today as much as it was needed then. In a world still grappling with division and prejudice, their story serves as a powerful reminder that our shared humanity is what truly defines us. The uniform they wore was blue, the color of the U.S. Army. But the honor they carried within them was universal. It's the same honor that motivates the best among us today, regardless of their background, to serve, to protect, and to strive for a better world. So, As we remember the 9th and 10th Cavalry and the 24th and 25th Infantry, let's not just see them as historical figures. Let's see them as teachers. Their legacy is not just one of military accomplishment. It's a moral compass for all of us. They showed the world that a person's worth is measured by their actions, their resilience, and their unwavering commitment to duty. They proved, beyond any doubt, that honor, courage, and patriotism know no color. Their enduring spirit continues to ride on, a timeless inspiration for generations to come, reminding us all to stand tall, serve with integrity, and live with honor. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through history. The story of the Buffalo Soldiers is one that deserves to be told and retold. If you found this story as inspiring as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next chapter. We'll see you next time.